The stars in the galaxy twinkled like 1,000 diamonds scattered across a dark, endless ocean. Far away from Earth, in a corner of space where danger lurked in every shadow, a powerful alien queen was about to face the most terrifying moment of her life. Her name was Queen Elara, ruler of a majestic alien empire, and her people trusted her to guide them through a galaxy filled with enemies, war, and political intrigue. But that trust would soon be tested in a way no one could have predicted. The story begins on the cold, metallic bridge of the Vorith, the warship of the Ravnik, a vicious alien faction determined to conquer the galaxy. Their leader, Commander Kale, was a ruthless being, known for his ability to crush anyone who stood in his way. The Ravnik had been tracking Queen Elara for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment had come. Elara was on a diplomatic mission, trying to make peace with a rival alien race, but the negotiations had failed. The Ravnik had used that failure to their advantage, launching a surprise attack on her convoy. Their ships came out of nowhere, a sudden and overwhelming force. Elara's royal guards fought bravely to protect her, but they were no match for the Ravnik's advanced weapons. In the end, she was captured, alive but captured. The Ravnik were ruthless. They didn't care about the queen's status or the consequences of her abduction. She was just another obstacle to their rule. Elara was dragged aboard the Vorith, her arms bound with energy cuffs, her pride bruised but not broken. She knew her people would come for her, but she didn't expect them to arrive in time. The Ravnik planned to execute her publicly, making an example of her to anyone who dared challenge their dominance. Elara, however, wasn't afraid. She knew her power, and she knew that the galaxy would never be the same again if she was lost. But she was alone now, surrounded by enemies. It felt like the end. Back on Earth, light years away, a much different kind of mission was about to unfold. Captain Jackson, a seasoned human soldier known for his unorthodox tactics and dangerous rescues, was finishing up a mission on a far-off moon when he received an encrypted message. It was a distress call from a secret ally, someone who knew of Jackson's reputation and the risks he was willing to take. He read the message, his heart racing as the words sunk in. The alien queen must be rescued. Only the foolish humans would dare to do it. The message was short, but the meaning was clear. The alien queen was in grave danger, and the Ravnik were about to carry out their execution. Jackson knew that if anyone could rescue the queen, it would be him. But even he had to admit, this was no ordinary mission. To rescue an alien queen from a heavily guarded warship like the Vorith was suicide. Jackson wasn't the kind of man who backed down from a challenge. He'd fought in countless battles, faced unimaginable dangers, and come out victorious every time. But this was different. Elara was no ordinary alien. She was a symbol of hope to many, a ruler who had fought for peace in a galaxy torn apart by war. Her death would send shockwaves across the stars, giving the Ravnik even more power and control. Jackson couldn't let that happen. He couldn't let the galaxy fall into the hands of such a brutal empire. The message was cryptic, but Jackson knew he couldn't waste any more time. He immediately began preparing for the mission. He gathered his team, each a specialist in their own field. Sergeant Lawson, a sharp-eyed sniper, Dr. Mia, a brilliant medic and tech expert, and Lieutenant Zara, a skilled pilot who could navigate through the most dangerous space lanes. Together, they were a team of misfits, each with their own reasons for joining the mission. But now, they had a new goal: save the Queen. "All right, team," Jackson said as he addressed the crew in the briefing room. "We've got one shot at this. The Queen is being held on the Vorith, deep inside Ravnik space. We don't know how many ships they have patrolling, but we do know this: the longer we wait, the less chance we have of getting to her in time." Zara, the pilot, leaned forward, looking at the star map in front of her. "The Vorith is heavily guarded. We'll need to find a way to sneak past their defenses. And if we're spotted, we'll be facing an entire fleet." "I know," Jackson replied, his jaw tightening. "We won't get spotted. We'll be in and out before they even know what hit them. Lawson checked his sniper rifle, a confident smile on his face. I'll cover you. You won't even know I'm there. Mia, always calm under pressure, scanned through the ship's data. I've got the tech we need. I can disable their security systems, hack their AI to give us an advantage. But we'll need to act fast. Jackson nodded. The plan was risky, but it was the only plan they had. The team would travel in a small stealth ship to the Ravnik stronghold, undetected by enemy sensors. They'd land near the Vorith, sneak aboard, and rescue the Queen before the Ravnik realized what was happening. It was a long shot, but Jackson trusted his team. They had faced worse odds before. Just before they left, Jackson received one final message. It was from a mysterious source who had sent the original distress call. The message was brief but critical. The Queen may be the only hope to stop the Ravnik. If you fail, everything is lost. Jackson closed his eyes for a moment. He had heard rumors of the Ravnik's power, of their plans to crush all resistance in the galaxy. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. He turned to his crew. We're going in, no matter what. We get the Queen, or we don't come back. The small stealth ship, a sleek black vessel designed for covert operations, blasted off into the unknown. As they made their way into enemy space, Jackson's mind raced with thoughts of the Queen. He had never met her, but he had heard of her, how she had fought for peace, how she had united alien species who had once been at war. Ilara was a symbol of hope for many, and if the Ravnik killed her, it would be a blow to all those who had ever dreamed of peace. The crew entered the vast darkness of space, the stars stretching out before them like a never-ending sea. The tension on board was palpable, but Jackson kept his focus. Every second counted. As they approached the Ravnik stronghold, the ship's cloaking device engaged, and they became nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Hold on. Zara's voice crackled over the intercom. We're about to enter Ravnik space. Brace for impact if we're detected. The small ship glided through the stars, evading enemy patrols. It was a game of cat and mouse. Every move calculated. Every sound listened for. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. The fate of the Queen, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. The stealth ship glided silently through the vast emptiness of space, its black hull blending into the shadows of the stars. The hum of the engines was barely noticeable, a constant reminder that they were still moving forward, deeper into enemy territory. The crew remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts, as the tension inside the small ship grew thicker with every passing moment. Captain Jackson stood at the front of the ship, staring out into the dark expanse, his mind racing through their plan. This mission was risky, no, suicidal. They were about to enter one of the most heavily guarded areas in the galaxy, the heart of Ravnik space. If they were discovered, the consequences would be immediate and deadly. But failure was not an option. Not this time. We're approaching the Ravnik sector. Zara's voice echoed over the intercom, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but even she couldn't hide the slight edge of tension in it. Zara had seen combat before, but this was different. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about sneaking into the lion's den and getting out without being noticed. Jackson turned to face his team, his expression as serious as ever. All right, we need to stick to the plan. If we're going to pull this off, we'll have to move fast, quiet, and with precision. The Vorith isn't just a warship, it's a fortress. We'll have to bypass their security and get to the Queen before they even know we're there. Mia, the team's tech expert, nodded, her fingers already flying over her tablet, scanning through encrypted data on the Ravnik's security systems. She had been working nonstop, gathering intel from all sources she could access, using her hacking skills to analyze the weak spots in the Ravnik's defenses. I've pinpointed their security grid, she said, looking up from the screen. The Vorith has a layered defense system, but it's not impenetrable. We can get in, but it's going to be tight. Tell us how, Jackson asked, his voice calm but demanding. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Okay, Mia began, tapping on her tablet to bring up a map of the Ravnik warship. The Vorath is divided into three main sections: the outer perimeter, the central core, and the holding cells where the Queen is being kept. The outer perimeter is heavily guarded by drones and automated turrets, but there's a weak spot on the west side, an old access tunnel used for maintenance. It's not on their primary radar, and they've stopped patrolling it for the past month. That's where we'll enter. Jackson nodded. Perfect. How do we get through the rest? The central core is where their most advanced tech is housed, Mia continued. The Ravnik have an artificial intelligence system that controls nearly everything on the ship. It's what keeps the whole place running, but it also makes it easier to breach. I'll need to plug into their mainframe to disable some of the security systems, but the AI will detect us within minutes, so we can't stay in one place for too long. Lawson, the sniper, grinned, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of the challenge. I'm used to being the quiet one. I'll provide cover if we run into any trouble. Jackson gave him a quick nod before turning to Zara. How close can we get with the ship? We don't want to raise any alarms. Zara's hands flew over the controls, her mind calculating the best possible approach. We can get within 500 meters of the Vorath before they detect us. After that, we'll need to make a manual descent using the cloaking system. I'll make sure we stay invisible until we're right above the target. The plan was coming together, but Jackson knew they had little time. The Ravnik weren't known for their mercy, and if they even suspected a rescue attempt, they would go into lockdown mode. Every move would have to be calculated, and every second would count. I'll take point, Jackson said, his voice unwavering. We'll land, move fast, and stay in constant contact. Mia, once you get into the system, disable the internal alarms and open the access points to the holding cells. Lawson, stay on top of any threats from the outside. We can't afford to be detected. What about the Queen? Zara asked, her concern evident. How do we even know where she's being held? Jackson gave her a look, his face hardening. We'll find her. We don't need to know her exact location. Just get to the central core, and we'll figure it out. We've got one shot, and we're not walking away empty-handed. As the ship approached the Vorath, Zara began to engage the cloaking system, and the ship's engines went silent, blending into the background of space. The Ravnik warship loomed ahead like a dark giant, its guns pointed outward, ready to fire at any sign of intrusion. But the cloaking system worked flawlessly, and they drifted closer, unseen by the enemy. Mia's voice broke the silence. I've got access to the maintenance tunnel. It's just ahead. We need to go in now before their sensors pick us up. The team made their way to the access hatch, which Mia had unlocked using her advanced tech. Jackson pushed the hatch open, and they slipped out one by one, careful not to make a sound. The hatch closed softly behind them, sealing them inside the maintenance tunnel, which was narrow and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the high-tech weapons they'd just passed. They moved through the tunnel in single file, their footsteps muffled by the metal floor. Every few steps, Jackson's eyes darted to the walls, watching for any signs of movement. The team knew that the Ravnik were waiting for them, but they couldn't show fear. Fear would get them killed. The tunnel eventually led them to a small maintenance bay, where they paused for a moment to check their gear and prepare for the next step. Mia connected her device to the ship's internal system, and within seconds, the walls around them flickered with light as a series of doorways opened. The AI had detected their presence, but Mia had already overridden the security systems, giving them just enough time to move forward. We're in, Maya said, her voice tight with concentration. We have about 10 minutes before they notice any serious glitches. We need to move quickly. Let's go, Jackson ordered, leading the way as the team followed closely behind him. As they made their way deeper into the Vorath, Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. The plan was working so far, but he knew that one slip-up would be enough to destroy everything. The Ravnik's security was unforgiving, and if they were caught now, it would be the end. The first security door they encountered opened easily. Mia had hacked into the system, disabling the locks. Beyond it lay a long corridor, illuminated by cold blue lighting. The sounds of distant chatter echoed through the halls, and Jackson motioned for the team to stay close. They had to remain undetected. The tension was unbearable as they moved through the ship's corridors, avoiding patrols and security cameras. They reached the center of the Vorith, where the holding cells were located, but the closer they got, the more dangerous it became. There were fewer guards, but they were far more dangerous. The Ravnik knew this ship like the back of their hands, and they were prepared for any threats. At the end of the corridor, they could see a large reinforced door. The symbol on it was unmistakable. This was where the Queen was being held. "We've made it," Jackson whispered. "But this is just the beginning." Mia was already at the control panel, her fingers dancing over the device as she worked to unlock the door. She was fast, but Jackson knew they didn't have much time. The AI was already starting to reboot, and they needed to get to Ilara before it was too late. Just as Mia tapped in the final code, an alarm blared through the ship and red lights flashed. It was too late. They had been detected. "Move, move, move," Jackson shouted, pulling out his weapon as the door slid open. The ship's alarm screamed through the corridors, its harsh noise like a jolt of ice water to the team's nerves. Red lights flashed above them, casting an eerie glow across the sleek metal walls. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. They had been caught. The Ravnik were aware of their presence now, and that meant every second counted. "Go. Now," Jackson barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a sharp knife. He turned toward the door that led to the holding cells, pushing forward even as Mia and Zara scrambled to keep up. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the hallways, each step an urgent reminder that they had no time to waste. Behind them, the doors to the corridor slammed shut with a metallic thud. The unmistakable hum of approaching security drones filled the air. They had to keep moving, or they wouldn't make it out alive. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before they send the drones in here," Maya shouted, her eyes scanning the flashing control panel on her wrist. "I've already disabled most of the ship's security, but the drones will find us unless we move fast." Jackson glanced at Zara, who was already preparing her weapon, her fingers steady and calm, despite the rising panic. "Zara, cover our backs. If anything gets too close, take it out." "Understood," she said, her voice unwavering. Mia wasn't wasting any time either. She had her device plugged into the control panel, typing in rapid succession, overriding locks and security systems as fast as she could. Jackson could see the strain in her eyes. This was their one chance to get inside the holding cells and rescue Queen Ilara. If they failed, they would be dead. "Almost there," Mia murmured, her fingers flying across the interface. "Just one more." "Done." With a soft, mechanical hiss, the door to the holding cells opened. Beyond it, a large chamber stretched out, dimly lit with a cold blue glow. It was silent, eerily so. Jackson stepped inside first, his boots making a barely audible sound as they hit the cold floor. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any signs of movement. He could hear his own breath as he waited, tense and alert. The walls of the chamber were lined with glowing control panels, and in the far corner, behind a reinforced glass window, lay the holding cells. Jackson's eyes locked onto them. That's where Ilara was. He could feel it in his gut. But just as they started moving toward the cells, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The sound of a drone bursting through a wall, its metal body crashing onto the floor, rattled their nerves. The Ravnik had found them. "Move! Move!" Jackson shouted again, his voice almost lost in the chaos. He sprinted forward, Zara and Mia close behind, as the first of the Ravnik security drones appeared in the doorway, its glowing red eyes scanning the room for any signs of life. Zara was quick, raising her weapon and firing 2 shots in rapid succession. The drone didn't even have time to react before it fell to the ground, sparks flying as it lost power. But more were coming. There was no time to waste. "Keep going. We have to get to the cells," Jackson ordered as they reached the reinforced glass barrier separating them from the Queen. They could hear the faint sound of breathing on the other side, but there was no time to waste. The Ravnik were closing in. Mia rushed to the control panel next to the glass, her hands moving faster than Jackson could follow. He could see the tension building on her face. She was good. No, she was brilliant. But even she had limits. This was the hardest part of their plan, breaking into the holding cells. "I'm trying to override the security," Maya said, her voice tight. "But the Ravnik have implemented some serious encryption. It's not easy to crack." "Do whatever you have to," Jackson urged, his mind racing. The drones were getting closer, and they had no time to wait. If they didn't get through that glass soon, they were done for. Suddenly, the door to the chamber burst open, and more drones flew in. They hovered just above the ground, their weapons aimed straight at the team. Zara raised her gun again and fired, taking down one of the drones, but the others kept coming. There were too many. The sound of their engines was deafening. "Forget the drones. Mia, hurry," Jackson yelled as he turned and began firing his own weapon. His shots hit their targets, but for every drone he brought down, 2 more appeared in their place. Mia's fingers worked frantically, her eyes locked on the control panel. "Got it. The glass is coming down in 3, 2, 1. With a loud hiss, the glass door slid open, revealing the small cell inside. The Queen was there, chained to the wall, her golden hair falling in messy strands around her face. She looked weak, but there was something in her eyes, a fire, a defiance that made Jackson's heart skip a beat. "Get her out of there," Jackson shouted, motioning for Mia and Zara to move quickly. They rushed toward the cell, but before they could get close, a bright light filled the room, and a deep, menacing voice echoed from every corner of the chamber. "Intruders detected." The voice was cold and unfeeling. "Prepare to be terminated." Mia's eyes widened. "It's the AI. It's activated the ship's defense systems." Jackson cursed under his breath. They didn't have much time left. The Queen was barely conscious, but she was alive. And that was all that mattered right now. "Help her up," Jackson ordered. Zara rushed to Ilara's side, helping the Queen stand despite her weakened state. Ilara's legs wobbled, but she didn't hesitate. She knew exactly what was at stake. "We need to get out now," Jackson yelled. "Zara, protect the Queen. Mia, find us an escape route." Mia's eyes darted to the control panel, her fingers moving faster than before. "There's a maintenance hatch near the east side. It'll lead us to the lower levels. We can escape from there." "Let's move," Jackson shouted. He turned, sprinting toward the door, with Zara and Mia right behind him, guiding Ilara through the chaos. The drones were coming fast, but they were too late. Jackson fired his weapon again, taking out another drone, and the rest scattered as they fled the holding chamber. The corridors felt endless, twisting and turning as they ran, dodging more drones and automated defenses along the way. Every corner they turned seemed to bring them closer to the heart of the Ravnik warship, and every step they took felt like it might be their last. "I can hear them getting closer," Zora panted, looking back as she held the Queen steady. "We're almost there," Maya said, her eyes scanning ahead, looking for the exit. The maintenance hatch was just a few more turns away. Finally, they'd reached the hatch, and Mia yanked it open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. "This way," she urged, stepping inside first. The others followed quickly, Jackson making sure to cover their retreat. The hatch slammed shut behind them with a loud bang, sealing them off from the chaos they had left behind. The small tunnel was dark and tight, but it felt like a small victory. "We made it," Jackson said, breathing heavily. "But it's far from over." We still have to escape the Vorith. Ilara, her face pale but determined, spoke for the first time since they had freed her. Then let's make sure they never forget this. Jackson smiled grimly. That's the plan. The air was thick with tension as Jackson and his team made their way through the narrow maintenance tunnels beneath the Ravnik warship. Their breaths came in heavy gasps, the sound of their footfalls muffled by the metal floor beneath them. Queen Ilara walked with difficulty, supported by Zara, but she was determined. Jackson could see the fire in her eyes. Despite her weakness, she was ready to fight, ready to reclaim her people. We need to get to the escape pods, Maya said urgently, glancing over her shoulder at the group. That's our only chance of getting off this ship alive. The Ravnik won't stop hunting us until we're out of their reach. Jackson nodded, keeping his voice low but firm. We'll make it. We have to. The passageway twisted and turned, each step taking them deeper into the bowels of the warship. There was no sign of the Ravnik yet, but Jackson knew it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. The ship's defense systems were still active, and the AI had already begun its relentless search for intruders. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the tunnel, followed by the sharp whine of metal grinding against metal. The walls trembled, and Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. What was that? Zara asked, her voice tense. Mia checked her wrist device, her face pale. They've activated the main cannons. The ship is on full alert. They're going to blast this tunnel open any second now. Jackson's heart raced. There was no time to waste. Move. We need to get to the escape pods before they blast us to pieces. They pushed forward, their footsteps quickening as they raced down the corridor. The walls around them hummed with energy, and Jackson could feel the vibration of the ship's weapons systems powering up. Not far now, Maya said, her voice barely audible over the growing roar of the ship's engines. The escape pods are just ahead. We're almost there. But as they rounded a corner, they froze. At the end of the corridor stood a group of Ravnik soldiers, their eyes glowing with menace. They had found them. Jackson didn't hesitate. Zara, take the lead. Zara sprang into action, her weapon raised and ready. She fired 2 quick shots, taking down the first 2 soldiers with precision. But more kept coming. Jackson could see the flashing of their weapons as they aimed at the group, and he knew they didn't have much time before the Ravnik overwhelmed them. Covering fire, Jackson shouted. He raised his own weapon and fired, hitting one of the Ravnik soldiers square in the chest. He didn't stop to watch it fall. The others were already moving, and they had no time to waste. Get to the pods now. Mia shouted, her voice cracking with urgency. She turned and fired, taking down another soldier who had been closing in on Ilara. The group sprinted down the corridor, the Ravnik soldiers hot on their heels. Each footstep was a race against death. Jackson glanced over his shoulder and saw the soldiers closing in, their weapons flashing as they fired in quick succession. A shot hit the wall near Jackson, sending a shower of sparks flying into the air. He didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. With a final push, they reached the door to the escape pod bay. Mia quickly bypassed the lock, her fingers moving like lightning on the keypad. The door hissed open just as another wave of Ravnik soldiers rounded the corner. Get in, Jackson ordered, shoving Ilara toward the nearest pod. Zara followed closely behind, and Mia was right at their heels. The Ravnik were almost upon them, but Jackson didn't look back. He dove into the pod, slamming the door shut behind him. The pod's engines roared to life, and with a jolt, they shot away from the Ravnik warship. Jackson exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding, feeling the tension in his body release as they shot into the cold vacuum of space. But the battle was far from over. We're not safe yet, Maya said, her voice steady but laced with tension. She quickly began typing into the pod's console, adjusting their course. The Ravnik will send their fleet after us. We'll need to lose them before they can track us down. We need to contact our people, Zara said, glancing at Ilara, who was still breathing heavily, her face pale but determined. "We can't do this alone." Jackson nodded. "Agreed. Mia, can you get a signal out?" Mia worked quickly, her fingers dancing across the console as she hacked into the pod's communication system. A moment later, she turned to them, her eyes wide with urgency. "I've sent out a distress signal. We should be able to reach our fleet within the hour if we stay on course. But we need to buy time." Jackson's grip tightened around the armrest of the pod's seat. "We'll hold them off. For as long as we can." The pod flew through the void of space, its sleek form a tiny speck against the vastness of the universe. Behind them, the Ravnik warship grew smaller as they accelerated, but Jackson knew they wouldn't be able to outrun the Ravnik for long. The Ravnik were relentless, and their ships were faster and better equipped. Minutes passed in silence, the hum of the pod's engines the only sound. Jackson kept his eyes on the view screen, watching the fading silhouette of the Ravnik warship. His mind raced with strategies, plans, anything that could keep them alive long enough to escape. Suddenly, a warning light blinked on the console. Mia's eyes snapped to it, her face paling. "They're launching pursuit ships. It's only a matter of time before they catch up." "Can we outrun them?" Jackson asked, his voice calm despite the fear that gripped his chest. Mia hesitated for a moment before answering. "We'll have to fight them off. The pod isn't equipped for direct combat, but I can modify the systems. It'll give us a fighting chance." "Do it," Jackson ordered, his voice firm. Mia immediately began working, her fingers flying over the controls as she rerouted power to the pod's weapon systems. A moment later, the pod's guns powered up, and Jackson felt a surge of hope. "Here they come," Zura said, her voice steady as she peered out of the window. Jackson could see the enemy ships closing in, their sleek, deadly shapes cutting through the darkness of space. The first Ravnik ship fired its weapons, sending bright streaks of light toward the pod. Jackson didn't flinch. He was ready. "Return fire," he shouted. Mia fired the pod's weapons, and the pod shuddered as lasers erupted from its cannons, striking the Ravnik ship dead on. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its debris scattering across space. But there were more ships coming, and they were already firing back. Jackson gritted his teeth, guiding the pod through the incoming fire. The pod veered left and right, narrowly dodging blasts that would have obliterated them in an instant. The Ravnik were relentless, but Jackson was determined. He wasn't about to let them take Ilara. "We're almost there," Maya said, her voice tight with concentration. "Just hold on a little longer." Another Ravnik ship fired, and this time, Jackson wasn't fast enough to avoid the blast. The pod rocked violently, and alarms blared as the shields took a hit. Jackson gripped the controls tightly, forcing the pod to stay on course. "We've lost some shield power," Maya said, her voice shaky. "We're not going to make it unless we finish this now." Jackson knew what needed to be done. He looked at Zara, then at Mia. "We're going to make one last push, full speed ahead, and we'll take them down one by one." With a final, desperate surge of energy, the pod shot forward, lasers firing at everything in their path. The Ravnik ships scattered, their defensive maneuvers too slow to keep up. The pod slammed through the last ship, destroying it in a final explosion that lit up the void of space. Jackson didn't wait to watch the results. He turned to Mia. "Get us out of here. Now." Mia's hands moved rapidly on the controls, and with a loud whoosh, the pod's engines roared to life once more, taking them beyond the reach of the Ravnik fleet. They had won. For now. Ilara looked at them, a weak but grateful smile crossing her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Jackson nodded, his expression grim. "This fight isn't over, but we've bought some time." The pod continued its journey, leaving the shattered remains of the Ravnik fleet behind. They had survived, just barely. But the war was far from over, and Jackson knew they would face even greater challenges ahead. For now, they had won the first battle, but the true fight for the future had only just begun. The small escape pod darted through the cold vacuum of space, its engines roaring as it pushed forward, leaving behind the destruction of the Ravnik fleet. Inside the pod, the atmosphere was tense, heavy with the fear of what awaited them. Ilara, still weak from the long ordeal, sat in a corner, her hands gripping the seat as she tried to steady her breathing. Her eyes, though filled with gratitude, reflected the deep sadness of everything she had lost. Jackson sat at the controls, his fingers hovering over the dashboard as he kept a close eye on the readings. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. His mind raced as he thought about what they'd just escaped from. The Ravnik were relentless, and he had no doubt they would come after them with everything they had. "We can't rest yet," Maya said, her voice steady but strained. She was sitting at the communications console, tapping away at the keys, trying to get a signal. "The Ravnik won't just let us go. They'll send everything they have after us." Zara, ever the optimist, tried to offer a reassuring smile. "We've escaped them for now. We'll make it to safety." But Jackson couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had led them through so much already, but this wasn't over. The Ravnik were powerful, and their pursuit would be relentless. Suddenly, a warning light flickered on the dashboard. A sharp beep echoed through the pod, and Jackson's heart skipped a beat. His eyes snapped to the screen. The readings confirmed his worst fears. "They're coming," he muttered, his voice low. "The Ravnik are already tracking us." Mia turned to look at him, her face pale with worry. "Can we outrun them?" Jackson quickly began calculating their options, but the answer was clear. The Ravnik ships were faster and more advanced. No matter how fast they went, it wouldn't be enough. "We have to buy ourselves some time," Jackson said, his voice firm. "We'll need to get out of their sensor range, at least long enough to make a jump to another sector." Zara stood up, her face set in determination. "What's the plan?" Jackson turned to face them, his expression grim. "We'll use the pod's stealth systems to cloak us from their sensors. We'll make a sharp turn into the asteroid field up ahead. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Mia nodded, typing furiously at the console. "I'll make the necessary adjustments. If we don't get this right, the Ravnik will find us within minutes." Mia fired the pod's weapons, and the pod shuddered as lasers erupted from its cannons, striking the Ravnik ship dead on. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its debris scattering across space. But there were more ships coming, and they were already firing back. Jackson gritted his teeth, guiding the pod through the incoming fire. The pod veered left and right, narrowly dodging blasts that would have obliterated them in an instant. The Ravnik were relentless, but Jackson was determined. He wasn't about to let them take Ilara. "We're almost there," Maya said, her voice tight with concentration. "Just hold on a little longer." Another Ravnik ship fired, and this time, Jackson wasn't fast enough to avoid the blast. The pod rocked violently, and alarms blared as the shields took a hit. Jackson gripped the controls tightly, forcing the pod to stay on course. "We've lost some shield power," Maya said, her voice shaky. "We're not going to make it unless we finish this now." Jackson knew what needed to be done. He looked at Zara, then at Mia. "We're going to make one last push, full speed ahead, and we'll take them down one by one." With a final, desperate surge of energy, the pod shot forward, lasers firing at everything in their path. The Ravnik ships scattered, their defensive maneuvers too slow to keep up. The pod slammed through the last ship, destroying it in a final explosion that lit up the void of space. Jackson didn't wait to watch the results. He turned to Mia. "Get us out of here. Now." Mia's hands moved rapidly on the controls, and with a loud whoosh, the pod's engines roared to life once more, taking them beyond the reach of the Ravnik fleet. They had won. For now. Ilara looked at them, a weak but grateful smile crossing her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Jackson nodded, his expression grim. "This fight isn't over, but we fought some time." The pod continued its journey, leaving the shattered remains of the Ravnik fleet behind. They had survived, just barely. But the war was far from over, and Jackson knew they would face even greater challenges ahead. For now, they had won the first battle, but the true fight for the future had only just begun. The small escape pod darted through the cold vacuum of space, its engines roaring as it pushed forward, leaving behind the destruction of the Ravnik fleet. Inside the pod, the atmosphere was tense, heavy with the fear of what awaited them. Ilara, still weak from the long ordeal, sat in a corner, her hands gripping the seat as she tried to steady her breathing. Her eyes, though filled with gratitude, reflected the deep sadness of everything she had lost. Jackson sat at the controls, his fingers hovering over the dashboard as he kept a close eye on the readings. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. His mind raced as he thought about what they'd just escaped from. The Ravnik were relentless, and he had no doubt they would come after them with everything they had. "We can't rest yet," Maya said, her voice steady but strained. She was sitting at the communications console, tapping away at the keys, trying to get a signal. "The Ravnik won't just let us go. They'll send everything they have after us." Zara, ever the optimist, tried to offer a reassuring smile. "We've escaped them for now. We'll make it to safety." But Jackson couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had led them through so much already, but this wasn't over. The Ravnik were powerful, and their pursuit would be relentless. Suddenly, a warning light flickered on the dashboard. A sharp beep echoed through the pod, and Jackson's heart skipped a beat. His eyes snapped to the screen. The readings confirmed his worst fears. "They're coming," he muttered, his voice low. "The Ravnik are already tracking us." Mia turned to look at him, her face pale with worry. "Can we outrun them?" Jackson quickly began calculating their options, but the answer was clear. The Ravnik ships were faster and more advanced. No matter how fast they went, it wouldn't be enough. "We have to buy ourselves some time," Jackson said, his voice firm. "We'll need to get out of their sensor range, at least long enough to make a jump to another sector." Zara stood up, her face set in determination. "What's the plan?" Jackson turned to face them, his expression grim. "We'll use the pod's stealth systems to cloak us from their sensors. We'll make a sharp turn into the asteroid field up ahead. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Mia nodded, typing furiously at the console. "I'll make the necessary adjustments. If we don't get this right, the Ravnik will find us within minutes." "We'll fight," Jackson said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll fight until the end." The escape pod floated silently in the depths of space, its engines now idle, the soft hum of the life support systems, the only sound that filled the small, enclosed space. The stars outside looked like distant diamonds, twinkling coldly in the vast emptiness. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. Jackson sat at the controls, his eyes fixed on the star map in front of him. He was tired, his body sore from the long battle and the near-death escape, but his mind raced. They had made it out, yes, but at what cost? Mia sat beside him, her fingers still twitching over the communications console, though she knew the chances of reaching anyone were slim. The Ravnik had severed most communication channels, and they were out of range of any friendly forces. Her usual calm was replaced with a faint unease. There was a sense of victory, but the relief didn't last long. Something about this victory didn't sit right with her. "I think we need to talk." Zara's voice broke through the silence. She was standing near the back of the pod, her arms crossed, looking at Ilara, who sat quietly in a corner, staring out of the small viewport. "We need to talk about what comes next." Ilara looked up at Zara's words, but there was no answer at first. She seemed to be in her own world, her gaze distant, as though she was lost in thought. It wasn't until Ilara spoke that the room seemed to quiet down even more. "You're right," Ilara said softly. "We've escaped, but the Ravnik will follow. They will never stop hunting us. The moment they find us again, There will be no escape. Her voice had a cold edge, but there was something deeper, something darker, hidden behind her words. Jackson sighed and turned to look at her. We'll be ready. We've made it this far. We can keep moving, keep fighting. Zora's eyes narrowed. Jackson, don't pretend that we're safe. You know the Ravnik won't give up. We've just run into one of their traps, and they'll be plotting their next move. This won't end until they've destroyed us. There was a long pause, the weight of her words sinking into everyone in the pod. It was true. No matter how many times they managed to escape, they couldn't outrun the inevitable. The Ravnik were powerful, and they weren't going to let their prized prisoner, Ilara, the alien queen, slip through their fingers. They would keep coming, and they would stop at nothing to finish the job. We don't have the resources to keep running forever, Maya said, her voice low. And we can't fight them with just this pod. We need to find allies. We need to regroup, plan, and rebuild. Jackson clenched his fists. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew they were right. The Ravnik were relentless, and their power was unmatched. It was only a matter of time before they tracked them down. No matter how many battles they fought, the Ravnik would never stop. But the thought of giving up was unbearable. He had seen humanity rise in ways no one had ever imagined, and he wasn't going to let that flame die out now. There was too much at stake. Too many lives depended on it. We can't give up, Jackson muttered. We've already lost so much. We can't just surrender. Zara stepped forward, her face serious. I'm not suggesting surrender, but we need to be realistic. The Ravnik aren't just going to give up because we run away. They'll keep coming, and every time they catch up, they'll take more from us. There's a price to victory. The words stung. It was a harsh truth that no one wanted to face. There would be no easy way out of this war. But at the same time, Jackson couldn't ignore the fire in his heart, the desire to fight back, to reclaim their freedom. I know, Jackson said quietly. I know there's a price, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. As long as we're together, we can find a way. We'll find a way to win. Ilara stood up suddenly, her voice commanding, cutting through the air like a blade. The price you speak of is not just yours to pay. It is mine too. I am not just a queen. I am the last of my kind. My people have already been destroyed by the Ravnik. I will never let them erase humanity from the galaxy as well. Her words sent a chill through the air. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of determination and grief, that made everyone realize how deeply this war affected her. Ilara wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for her people's legacy, for the future of her kind, for everything that had been taken from her. Jackson looked at her, a sense of respect growing within him. Then we fight together. We all have a stake in this. We'll find a way to win. Zara nodded. But we can't keep running forever. We need to find a place to regroup, to prepare for what's coming. The Ravnik are coming, and when they do, they'll come with everything they have. They won't stop until we're gone. There was a long silence. Everyone seemed lost in thought. They had fought hard, survived against all odds, but the road ahead seemed endless. The Ravnik would stop at nothing to see them destroyed, and their next move could be the final one. But then Maya spoke again, her voice a little steadier. There's a place. I've heard of a resistance group. It's small, but they're well hidden. They've been fighting the Ravnik for years, and they're known to have some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Jackson looked at her, his curiosity piqued. Where is it? Mia paused, as if considering how much to reveal. It's in the Epsilon sector. It's far from the Ravnik's control, and it's one of the last places they haven't managed to infiltrate. But getting there won't be easy. We'll have to navigate through Ravnik-controlled space. Jackson's mind began to race. The Epsilon sector. It was risky, but it was a chance, perhaps their best chance, to find help. If they could make it there, they might be able to build the strength they needed to take on the Ravnik once and for all. We'll go, Jackson said firmly. We don't have a choice. We'll head for the Epsilon sector. But Zara shook her head. Jackson, don't forget, this won't be a simple journey. The Ravnik won't let us get there without a fight. They'll be watching every move we make. I know, Jackson replied, his voice filled with resolve. But we don't have time to waste. We need to regroup, and we need to do it now. The team gathered around, all of them aware that the choice they made now would shape the future of this war. They had no idea what awaited them in the Epsilon sector, but they knew one thing: the fight wasn't over. Ilara, standing with them, gave a slight nod. If you're going to fight, then I will fight beside you. For my people, for humanity, I'll give everything I have to make sure the Ravnik don't win. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the sacrifices they would make were unknown. But one thing was clear: they had already lost so much, and they weren't going to let it all be for nothing. The cost of victory would be high, but they had no other choice. The battle for their survival was just beginning, and it would take everything they had to emerge victorious.